The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. Good morning, colleagues. We are on the second round of questions for the panel on Bill number 170-36, as amended by the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriations, and Housing. We will begin with Senator Pito Terlahi. Senator St. Augustine. Thank you. Senator Brown. Senator Vice Speaker Tina Munya Barnes. Okay, thank you. Speaker Therese Terlahi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to follow up on an earlier question from one of my colleagues regarding the 11 million reserve amounts for FY21. So that report we received maybe 1 month ago. Will that money be available to use for the list of items that we discussed yesterday that where the excess FY21 revenues will be spent?
Madam Speaker, I think you asked my colleague, the Budget Director, about that. So I really wasn't prepared to answer that particular question. But in general, if money is in reserve and not spent, it will be considered in the Governor's Transfer Authority.
All right, and okay, so Madam Chair, will we be expecting the other members of the panel, or?
I don't believe he'll be here this morning, Speaker.
Okay. All right, I'm just, I guess, perplexed if we're going to get confirmation then. So yesterday we came up with a balance after, if there's authority to use money for Guam Fire Department's over expenditure of 5 million, and then they said then there would be an approximate balance of 5 million in the $62 million FY21 excess revenues. But if there's also an $11 million in a reserve, and that's also available to pay off some of these costs of FY21 revenues, then that looks like 16 million potential. Mr. Byrne, can you confirm that?
No, Senator. As I just said, that the reserve would be available for the Governor's Transfer Authority, and unfortunately I don't have all those in my head, but whatever the amount of the reserve that's actually used for the Governor's Transfer Authority would reduce that 11 million. So I can't confirm that number.
Right, but the Transfer Authority would be used to pay additional appropriations over what's already been appropriated. In other words, it's 11 million plus 62 million excess revenues that we have available, the Governor has available.
Just taking those, if I may, apart, the 11 million might, as I think I just said, the 11 million might be considered a source for the Governor's Transfer Authority. I think the Budget Director mentioned that there was an overspend, and I forget the amount that he said, an overspend, for instance, at GFD. The source of revenues to make up that deficit might well come from that very scheduler looking of reserve amounts.
Okay, so I think that's why I want confirmation. So it looks like then if the 11 million is available to use for the 5 million at GFD, it's, we're talking about 16 million then available for all these, the list of expenditures that we went through yesterday.
it's possible that up to 16 million
Right.
could be available.
Okay,
But I didn't go any really further than that because there was 5 million available, and 5 million would cover the two bills that are currently being considered.
all right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Byrne. There, I have no further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Speaker Terlahi. Senator Duenas? Senator Moylan? Senator Atta? Senator Titlegy?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to my colleagues. And Mr. Berndt, good morning, Steve. And of course, the staff of the legislature. Good morning. Thank you for all your hard work, by the way. We never thank you guys enough. So, Mr. Byrne, it was said, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, can you tell me why BBMR is not here again?
They were invited, Senator Titlegy. I can't tell you why they're not here.
They were invited, but they're not here. Okay. As the oversight chair, are you going to, or as the chair, are you going to request that they come or subpoena them to come in?
They're aware to be here, Senator Titlegy.
So should we pause until they get here?
Are you requesting for us to pause? Are you?
Well, they were asked to show up, just wondering.
If you have questions for Mr. Byrne or our director from OFB, you can pose your questions to them.
And we have questions for BBMR as well, Madam Chair. Can we at least call to find out when they'll be here, if they're able to come, Madam Chair?
We'll take a brief recess. The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. BBMR, Mr. Carlson is currently in a meeting, so please ask your questions to this panel so we can complete the second round.
Madam Chair, we're discussing finances here. Hard-earned tax-paying dollars from our community. Don't you think we should have everyone here at the table to discuss this? I mean, not everyone has privy to the administration.
Senator Tigley, this is the panel that's available to us now. If you'd like to ask your questions, please do so.
Then I recommend that we don't pass this bill until we get BBMR. Well, I'll go ahead and ask my questions to Mr. Byrne, and hopefully he'll answer it. But
Please proceed.
the funding source on this, in this bill, as well as the other two bills that are coming up prior to this, has three funding sources. We already know one that is mute, the EITC. Second is ARP funding. And Mr. Carlson yesterday asked if I had a copy. Well, I got a copy of the ARP report. And according to the ARP report, $575,712,689 is what has been allocated. And the expenditures, encumbrance, and then the balance. There's still a balance of $419 million out there that has not been spent. So if this has already been an allocation for this funding, how are we going to be able to allocate these three other bills into ARP funding? Can the governor just, revamp this report and incorporate this, Mr. Byrne?
Thank you, Senator. I think you asked three different questions in there.
No, just one, just the ARP funding. Let's just start with the ARP funding. Right now, it's been allocated 578, right? Okay, so my question is, of this funding, which has already been allocated, and this bill requires for, asks for ARP funding and/or, will the governor be able to switch this around and incorporate these three bills into the ARP funding?
Senator, I don't believe this bill makes any reference to ARP funding other than the issue of EITC, which we discussed yesterday. EITC is included in the ARP Act, but isn't related to the Treasury ARP funding, which I think is the numbers you were looking at.
Okay. Under the 2021 General Fund unappropriated revenues, I gave to you a copy of the Attorney General's opinion with regards to the ability for the administration or the governor to use any of that excess revenue unless it's appropriated. You talked about estimated, well, yesterday Lester did, sorry if I'm saying you, but yesterday, an estimated shortfall as well as vendor payables were mentioned in tax refunds and a deficit. The estimated shortfalls for special funds came in at $20 million. That's going to need an appropriation, right? Based on the law that's in front of, based on the law that we passed in the FY22 budget. You're going to need the legislature to appropriate that, right?
Well, I think there's two parts to answer that question.
Sure.
The first one is it's a reality. Money for special funds that have a deficit have to come from somewhere, and the general fund is the fund that is the fund that has to carry the burden of all the other funds. So if we decided, and that seems to be totally impractical, that we stop paying money out of special funds as soon as that fund shows the deficit, then maybe what you're suggesting would work. But in reality, it doesn't work. The general fund must always be the safety fund for all the other funds. There is nothing stopping this legislature appropriating the funds if it feels that's the correct thing to do. But I'm not sure I would necessarily come to the conclusion that they must do so in order to subsidize the deficit in the special funds.
Have you had a chance to read the Attorney General's opinion with regards to the language in the FY22 budget requiring that any excess revenue at all has to be appropriated by this legislature? It's not like the administration can just take that excess revenue of $62 million and start spending it where it feels it should.
Well,
Unlike the reserve account, if I'm not mistaken, I got this from OFB, that in the reserves, the 11 million that's there, after 90 days, then, well, let's just stay with this first. I'll talk to you about the reserve.
I'm not really sure what this letter says. It
Okay.
appears to be a response to a conversation you had with the Attorney General. I don't
No.
think.
It's not a conversation, Mr. Burns. Just to let you know some background, the letter was sent to the Attorney General for their opinion on the language that was used in the FY22 budget regarding a section about any excess revenue in 21 and 22. That's what the letter is. And they responded to me there saying that, no, the administration cannot spend any excess revenue in 21 or 22. It must be appropriated by the legislature. So I was asking, how are you able to spend on any shortfalls or any deficit or even GFD that overexpended by 5 million? I mean, but now you just told us that you can be using the reserve funds. If I'm not mistaken, you have like 90 days to utilize this reserve funds before it's...
Okay. May I respond to some of the things you said?
Sure, please, Ms. Bird.
I only use the word conversation because that's the beginning, the very first sentence starts as discussed during our conversation. So I think I might be reasonably assured that that was the genesis of this letter.
Yep.
There are two paragraphs in the end of this letter, and it wasn't addressed to me, so I'm not really entirely sure what the question was, but it talks about the appropriation of excess revenues, but it also says, however, other provisions within the public law authorize the governor to expend general fund revenues not otherwise identified by dollar amount. I think, but I'm not entirely sure, but I think we're talking, if you're talking about the special funds, that would be covered by that paragraph. With regard to GFD, I didn't quite say what you said. What I said was the budget director said that there was a overspend in that department, which he was going to consider for the governor's transfer authority. The speaker asked me about the reserve funds, and I said that might be a source of revenues for the governor to use for her transfer authority.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. My
Senator
time is
Tello,
up.
your time up.
Appreciate it.
Thank
And you're
you.
in the same building as the Attorney General, so maybe you might want to discuss about that letter.
Thank
Okay?
you, Senator Titlegy. We're now done with the second round of questions. We'll take a brief recess to excuse the panel and prepare for the round of comments and amendments. Sizio Esmasi, Mr. Burns, Sizio Esmasi, Director Guerrero. We're in recess. The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. We are now in the third round of comments and amendments for Bill 170-36 as amended. We will begin with Senator Pito Terlahi. Senator San Agustin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to introduce an amendment that Senator Frank asked me to make sure I introduce it, and it's found on AB 170P1FBJ TMPCOTW, and it's to add a co-sponsor of the bill, Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munoz Barnes.
On the amendment, hearing no objections, amendment passes.
And if we could, you can come back to me to do the closing for Senator Bloss as he requested me to do. And then
Yes.
I'll make final comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator San Agustin. Senator Ada.
No amendments, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Brown.
I don't have any amendments, but are we able to comment? This is our last round to comment on the bill. I just think this whole process is brought to light, and as I mentioned yesterday, obviously the intent of the appropriation, I think, is very honorable in terms of the work that GUMA is performing in our community, and certainly to start these incubator programs for those in our community that are interested in wanting to pursue this interest. But I think it's brought to light, and I'm sure we'll have to look at it as we look at the other bills on the agenda with regards to the actual funding source. And I think, my dear colleagues, we need to be mindful of that. I think we're already starting to see the signs of where money is not available. And certainly as we look through this process in the next few months, we're probably going to have to be even more responsible, even before we get to the new fiscal year, on how we appropriate funds and determine whether or not these funds are legitimate. It's taken us this long to find out from the administration very clearly yesterday that obviously the funding source that was originally being looked at is not available. And it's not available for this legislature to appropriate. And there's, $121 million worth of legislation that has been introduced to include this bill to use the Earned Income Tax Credit funding that now we're finding is not a legitimate funding source. So colleagues, let's be mindful. I think there's a whole bunch of programs and things out in the community we would love to appropriate money for, but we have to make sure that we're being responsible with regards to that. We need to make sure that this is legitimate money. And we also need to make sure that what we're appropriating is really the most critical priorities in the government, because as the months and the weeks go on, unless Uncle Sam has more money to spread out around the island, it's going to get tight, and we're going to probably have to come in and start cutting. And we're going to have to cut into the flesh of the government, and I hate doing that. That's been a very painful process that is not pleasant. And some of the colleagues here that I love to introduce have never been through that process. If you've been here just a very short time, you've not experienced the realities of what it is when it's a downside, and we're not able to just introduce all these wonderful bills that we want to do our press releases and get attention and an appreciation from our public for. But that's a tough job. That's why we're here, and we're supposed to make those responsible decisions with regards to the people's money. So I hope we're mindful of that as we move forward with other appropriations that we have to include this bill. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to comment.
Situasmasi, Senator Brown. Vice Speaker Barnes, you're recognized.
Situasmasi, Madam Chair, and Mananasituas, to my colleagues and to the listening Guam residents out there. First of all, I want to take the time, Madam Chair, to comment on this bill. I don't have any amendments, but I'd like to thank the good author for proffering the amendment to include me as a co-sponsor. And Madam Chair, I know you know that when this program started in 2013, it was initiated to not just mentor entrepreneurs, but it was also to mentor artisans. It was a way to protect, promote, to advocate our island residents in as far as where their talents go and how could they open a business. And the mentoring program, Madam Chair, is this 16 weeks of training in branding their product, branding their identity, branding the reason. This program also teaches them how to financially get set and put their footing in place so that when when this training is over, these entrepreneurs and artisans will have an opportunity to own their own business, to be productive citizens within the community as it relates to their merchandise or to their crafts or to their artwork, and to be able to share it with those even around the world. I know that when this program was founded, one of the business vendors, which was duty-free, literally did a match program with Guma to get this program started so that we can teach and train and help preserve and advocate and promote products from Guam. And I want to say, Madam Chair, that the bill will state that over 220 individuals have graduated from this program. I know that when we have events around Guam and they have these pop-up food vendors and pop-up tents to an event, that a lot of these incubated businesses are up and running. And what better way, Madam Chair, is to continue to support this program. And I want to say that even as we look at this program today, there are more than 28 businesses and then some on a waiting list to be part of this program. And it's not just handing resources out from the government. It is about taking a program, putting a little resources into mentoring these businesses and these artisans, and then in the ultimate end, after completing this training program, they will be able to go out on their own and become business experts in what they want to promote and sell. And what better way, Madam Chair? And I'd like to say that when this program first got initiated, I said that was a great idea, thinking out of the box, not just getting money for free from the government, but showing a return of investment, an ROI, to give back to those really seeking to start businesses but couldn't literally do it on their own. They just needed that extra assistance and training to help them out. So, Madam Chair, this is an excellent bill. If we give a little of the resources into this program, the return of the investment will be so much more greater. And I want to say that this program also continues to work with other nonprofits and other organizations to see what they can do. I understand that in 2020 alone, Guma was awarded a 3-year grant program expanding their work into all 19 villages for home-based cottage businesses. That is a definite win-win for our community, Madam Chair. So I stand in full support of this bill. I want to thank the good senator, my brother from Barrigada, for giving me the opportunity to be a co-sponsor, and ask my colleagues to support this measure. I know my time is up. Sana Maasi.
Thank you very much. Vice Speaker. Speaker Therese Terlahi, comments and amendments on the bill. Recognize you. Speaker Terlahi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to say that, I think we all appreciate this GUMA program. This is the Guam Unique Merchandise and Art Program. They've been around for years. They've done excellent work in our community. They have really led us and served a really important purpose that government should be serving, and that is to train small businesses, give them the tools necessary to grow their enterprise, giving people tools to decide whether they actually want to enter into business, and invest their life savings into it, whether they would be able to make a profit out of it, make a living. And really, many of our artists, our artisans, have been beneficiaries of the GUMA programs. And GUMA has also went out and sought their own grants from places like the Administration for Native Americans. And I think they've been doing that for years. And so right now, they're currently in the process of going village to village pursuant to one of these grants and trying to train in the villages and make sure that in at least every village they can grow 6 more small businesses. And on the arts fairs that we have had, GUMA, presence is very well known. Some of our favorite artists, we've seen them grow because of the efforts of GUMA. So we've also seen GUMA as a beneficiary of Gita receiving almost $50,000 recently through they call it the QC Series 3 grants, and for the purpose of entrepreneur incubation or training individuals in new industries. And so, this is the purpose of Gita, is to do this, to help incubate entrepreneurs, train individuals in new industries. And so they subgrant out to GUMA, for example, to do that. And so I think that they've done a very good job. And my one concern with the bill is that, we're awarding to one particular nonprofit as opposed to saying, we're putting this money for this purpose, such as, incubating businesses, and that, then we allow Gita, for example, or someone else to have them compete, the nonprofits compete for this money, or some other guidelines as to how it will be passed out. But for now, because of GUMA's record, I think we can feel confident in that we are giving them this money for a very clear purpose, and that in lieu of giving it to a government agency to do the same thing. And I would just like to clarify that by adding a couple amendments that I think go towards the intent of the bill, and that is to make sure that these monies that we are granting actually get to benefit those subgrantees, the small businesses that GUMA is trying to assist, and that they do that on some kind of open and fair basis so that everyone has an equal opportunity. And I think that that would help us to, ensure that we are meeting a government purpose in doling out these funds to one particular entity. I know we did this in the past for, my time's running out, so I'm going to go forward with my amendments. The first one, page 3, line 13. It's been passed out. And so we're in section 2, it's an appropriation to GUMA, and it currently says, for the purpose of providing financial startup support to incubate graduates of the GUMA business program. And I'm going to add in the words so that it will now read, for the purpose of sub-grant awards for incubator participants and home-based businesses. These sub-grant awards will provide financial startup support to incubate graduates of the GUMA. So in other words, it won't all be used on administrative costs, but will actually result in sub-grants to the actual entrepreneurs. So that would be my first amendment, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Speaker Terlahi. On the amendment, line 13, page 3, Senator Sinogstein, you are recognized.
Madam Chair, the only thing I question is when the statement is made that it will not be used for administrative purpose, I understand that the Guam program has been in existence, and they're asking now for this government assistance to continue to expand their program. I'd be very careful. I'd be very careful on how we want to tell them how to do their business when they've been successful. It's been stated by the sponsor of the amendment, or the author of the amendment, that they've been successful and they've been doing this program. Now we want to tell them, you can only do it this way. It's no different when I look at the other amendment, both amendments. I have reservations with that. They're doing a good job. They're asking us, can you give us 250 so we can help us keep this program going? I say yes. That's why I'm a co-sponsor. That's why the bill was written the way it was written. And so, as much as I have no problem with the sub-grant, but I'm very careful not just to support it and then find out later that we tied the hands of the folks that are running the program. And if they're going to use any money, they're probably going to use very little, because the intent was for all the business that they're helping in the incubator program. So to restrict it to, you can't do anything else but just to give it to the businesses, I got reservations with that. So, and I'm waiting for a call from the Guam folks. And once they get back, then I'll state my objection. Hopefully it'll be before we go to the vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Sinogstein. On the amendment, Senator Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Again, we all recognize the importance of this program and the benefits in our community, particularly for the artisans in our community that want to pursue their talents and expand that as entrepreneurs and contribute to that process. I think the thing that's different here with regards to this particular bill and what we are going through is we are taking public funds and we're expanding that by transferring or essentially intending from whatever source of funds I'm still trying to figure out here, $250,000 of public money to do this. I don't think it's unreasonable to have a public process of accountability with how those funds are spent. Otherwise, we can all pull out of our pocket our most favorite, nonprofit entity here on Guam that we support and transfer money to them. Because we continue to expand the role of government with regards to things that should be out separate from the government of Guam. That's the whole intent. You want these nonprofit organizations to operate independently of the government. But as time goes on, as in this case, we're asking to use public dollars. And I know who the organizers are of this particular for Guma. But do we make exceptions for the ones we like and the ones we don't know, we don't care about? Is that how we distribute public funds at a time that we're starting to find out, at least from the financial representations that have been made in the last 24 hours, that we don't have as much money flowing as we thought we did, and as much money as we thought that we're going to have available to appropriate by this legislature with where we are right now. So I think anything we can do to ensure more accountability, as we use that word so often, more transparency, we use that word to ad nauseum, we should do that. Because that's the difference. If this was a nonprofit acting independently in terms of their own revenues, their own grant funding, then certainly that's their business to operate how they choose to. But when you're coming and asking for public funds that they're going to be using and spending, and I don't doubt that the organizers of this particular for Guma will use it appropriately, but we have to ensure that these standards are in place. We can't simply appropriate because these are people we know and people we like. I think the public has a greater expectations, and we should have a greater expectation as legislators on how we authorize the expenditure of public money, even though I still don't have a clear reading of exactly what the appropriation is here. that we are taking out to try and find this $250,000. So I do support the amendment that's been put forth. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Brown. On the amendment,
Point of information.
please state your point of information.
Yes, I just want to point out to the body, so in the intent of the bill, it says to provide financial assistance to help provide startup businesses with support. In GUMA's testimony itself, and I quoted this from their testimony, they lay out the process and the purpose of the budget, and so they spell out the budget, and they dictate that a certain amount, 150,000, is going to go to the incubator support applicants, directly to the applicants, just exactly as I've laid out in my amendment, and to the home-based businesses. So that's where this language comes from. It's from their testimony, their supplemental testimony very clearly states the purpose of their funds is to, in turn, give it to out in subgrants. And then they even in their testimony have given us the criteria for these subgrants. So I think this would be consistent with their testimony and the bill, the intent of the bill as stated in the bill. And in the section that we're amending that says financial startup to incubate graduates, this is, so the subgrant awards language comes from them.
Thank you, Speaker. On the amendment, Senator Sonogstein.
Yes, Madam Chair, just to update from, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not objecting to this, I'm supporting this. I spoke to the GUMA folks, and there's not a problem. They have federal grants, this is for subgrants, so they said they can work with it.
Thank you for your point of information, Senator Sonogstein. On the amendment, hearing no objections, amendment passes. Speaker Terlahi, you are still recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the second amendment's on line 14 of page 3. In the same section of the bill, we're adding a sentence that will read, rules outlining the competitive process shall be posted on GUMA's website prior to receipt of application for grants under this appropriation, which shall include the guidelines on the reviewing and scoring of applications and the determination of the subgrant award amounts. And, it's clear that when they do this under any other grants that they have to provide this type of information to the grantors, right? And so I think this would be consistent, and I know that this business is very capable of doing this, and they've outlined the process of how they're going to give out their grants. So I don't think it's even adding an additional burden on them because they're prepared and they're very able to do these things. So I just think this also just, supports transparency for this process. It supports our government purpose and that we're, achieving through this nonprofit company. Thank you.
Sejus Masi, Speaker. On the amendment, Senator Sonogstein, you are recognized.
Thank you. Like I mentioned earlier, Madam Chair, I reached out to the GUMA folks. Currently, the program has these. It's under their federal process, and I don't believe we need to have the same thing duplicate just to do the same thing they're already doing today. So with that, I don't think there's a need for it. I'll object to it, but they're doing it already. To require it on this, I don't think there's a need. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sonogstein. On the amendment, Senator Brown.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Again, just to reiterate the points I made earlier, I don't think there's anything wrong with having this information available. I mean, it's wonderful they're doing it for their federal process. Certainly, if they have grants from the federal government, they have their requirements that they need to meet. The difference is we're talking about $250,000 of taxpayer money for the government of Guam that's paid for and otherwise intended to directly benefit our people. I think there should be a public accounting of that that's separate from the federal requirements that they're meeting, because the federal government does not have oversight over the $250,000, assuming this legislature passes this legislation. So I don't think it's an unreasonable expectation. It's something I'm sure they would already have in place with regards to their federal program and funding that they receive. I don't think this is an insurmountable requirement to provide this information for the general public and those that may be wanting to apply for this program and participate with regards to this program. Thank you again for the opportunity to comment on
Thank
this
you,
amendment.
Senator Brown. Senator Titlegy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I rise in support of this amendment. This legislature talks about transparency and accountability. Well, that's what this amendment does. And for anybody to vote against this amendment, then they don't believe in transparency. It clearly shows that the same requirements that the federal government requires when receiving a grant, these are requirements that they have to provide. Putting it on the website just shows everyone that this application process, the scoring and the review of it is done fairly for everyone to review. So let's, put our money where our mouth is and let's promote transparency. And this is what this amendment does.
Thank you, Senator Titlegy. On the amendment, Speaker.
To close?
To close, please
Yes,
close.
thank you. Yes, I want to thank my colleagues for their remarks, and I echo those sentiments that really, it's just because these are similar to any grantor would require this of their grantees. The federal government or the ANA may be requiring this, but this is government of Guam, local funds that we are giving out. And it's a very minimal requirement just to show that their process will be fair and, to put an assurance in our law where we grant them the money that that is going to happen. And if we gave this money to GITA for the exact same purpose, we would expect the GITA to do the exact same thing, and GITA has done that with all the money that they've distributed to nonprofits or to for-profit organizations during this pandemic, the CARES money, the ARP grants that they are giving out. They very clearly state the exact same things. They put out the guidelines on how, each company will be either eligible or not eligible, right? And how that will be determined. So again, I think it's a minimal requirement. It's actually something very well within the ability of this GUMA organization to do. And it's pretty much, I would think, minimal for us as a legislature to require when we're giving out money to one nonprofit over any others. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Seduce Masi, Speaker. There has been an objection to the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by raising your hand. Amendment fails. We'll now move on to the next amendment, the last amendment in the drive. I apologize. Senator Torres, would you like to make any comments? Senator Duenas? Senator Moylan? Thank you very much. We'll move to,
Excuse me.
Senator Titlegy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I don't have any amendments at this point, but I would like to make some comments to this body, the body that just recently passed a budget bill for FY22. And in that bill that was passed by the majority of this legislature, they talked about what would happen with any excess revenue. And I just wanted to reiterate what they voted on. Nothing herein shall prevent Imagahagon from making such deposits into the rainy day fund as deemed necessary. General fund revenues collected in excess of the adopted revenues as basis for appropriations contained in Public Law 35-99, which is the FY21 budget, by the way. And this act, which is the FY22, shall be deposited as follows. 70% of the excess revenue shall be deposited into the Income Tax Refund Efficient Payment Trust Fund for Chapter 51, Title 11 Guam Code annotated. And 30% of such excess revenue shall be deposited into the Rainy Day Fund, provided that all excess revenues referenced herein shall be subject to a legislative appropriation. Earlier, one of my colleagues wasn't sure on really where this money is coming from. I mean, even I was concerned too, or confused, because I thought maybe ARP funding, It hasn't been, this body has before asked the governor to use CARES Act money, which we don't have that authority to do, but stops us now from asking her to use ARP funding first to pay this off. And in fact, how much did GUMA receive from the ARP funding? Now we're asking, now this bill completely mutes the, takes out the earned income tax credit because it's not done, it's undoable. Not even the hospital is going to be able to use earned income tax credit as a viable source for funding the hospital. I mean, I'm surprised no one has, deleted that section. So what's left is 2021 general fund unappropriated revenues that hasn't even been audited. And here this body is making a decision to start appropriating funds that have not even been audited yet. It's irresponsible. There is no doubt we all support GUMA and all the good work that they're doing and have done in the past. But now it's like we're pegging each other on whose bill's going to get first on the agenda for their special interest bills. It would be a different scenario, or I would feel differently if we had the OPA's report in front of us. But at the very end, this body voted on a budget bill to put 70% of excess revenue into the income tax refund trust fund. And here everyone is spending it like crazy. Where was the responsibility then for tax refunds? And then 30% of any excess revenue was supposed to go to the rainy day fund because we know it's going to stop raining federal money here, and then what are we going to do? How are we going to adjust in FY23 the funding that was used this year to pay for the increase of salaries for our public safety officers at $16 million? Where are we going to come up with the money to sustain that? So I think everybody needs to sit back and, calm down a bit. At least let's wait until the public auditor and be financially responsible comes out with their report on really how much excess revenue there is. But everyone who voted on that budget bill to use any of these funds that went into tax refunds is changing your mind now, that the people's tax refunds are not important. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Titlequee. Senator San Augustine to close on the bill on behalf of Senator Blas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My colleagues, other than myself and Senator Blas and our other co-sponsors, we stand in support of Bill 170 that will provide a small appropriation to GUMA to help their incubator business continue to expand the creativity of the arts, the knowledge of the tools and operators need to build the capacity to flourish as a small business on Guam. While GUMA has produced many successful small businesses with a limited grant resources, they have many needed assistance with capital to procure much needed tools and equipment that may be shared amongst the incubators. The source for the $250K comes from the 2021 unappropriated general fund revenues. We've been informed that the funding is available for this bill. We have been discussing small business through this session, and this bill is another small step to get the incubator business up on their feet to become the true small business. Senator Blas thanks all the co-sponsors of this bill, and he asks that for the support of the colleagues in moving this bill forward and voted on and passing. Zeus Masi. And then the next motion is Madam Chair, I move that Bill 170-36 Ellis, as amended by the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, Housing, and further amended in the Committee of the Whole, with the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole to be placed on the third reading file.
On the motion, hearing no objections, motion passes. We are still in the Committee of the Whole, and we will, yes, Speaker Terlahi.
Yes, Madam Chair, I would move that if we cannot get the fiscal team here for our Committee of the Whole, that's the whole purpose of going into Committee of the Whole, and if they're not going to be available, that we rise and we proceed with the other items on second reading and come back to Committee of the Whole when that fiscal team is available.
We will take a moment's recess to ensure that the Committee of the Whole will join us after lunch. Okay, well, a minute's recess. We are back from recess, and we will recess until 2 p.m. today. Situas Masi, colleagues.